Hi, and welcome to Prepping Essentials.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Sunday the 4th of October. Just making my way down to the land. As always, not quite sure what we're going to get done today, but let's find out. Well, here we are down on the land. It's a cool morning again. Massive amounts of rain overnight. I thought I'd take advantage this morning, try and get a couple of hours because the sun is just peeking through the trees there. However, the forecast is for a huge weather front to move in from the southwest today. So if I just run you onto the entrance here and we take a little look to the southwest, there it is. So it's a tale of two weather fronts. That one, which is to come in a few hours I suspect, versus what looks like a really pleasant morning if you kind of look northeast. So we'll see, I guess. There's not a huge amount that I desperately need to do today. I did want to do a little bit of tidying up in the cabin because it has got a bit messy and out of control over the last few weeks. Also need to sort out some more firewood for the wood burning stove, and I've got a pile just under a tarpaulin, so I'll cut a little bit of that. And I'm also looking at the garden and polytunnel, because hopefully within the next couple of weeks construction will start on the polytunnel version 2, which isn't going to be a polytunnel, but I have plans for this existing one. So yeah, lots of little fiddly things. No big construction, no big harvesting, but there might be a little cabin chat. But first things first, I need to get into the cabin, get opened up, and certainly get a fire going because it is cool. That sun looks beautiful, but it's a bluff. it's not throwing any heat out at all. Still quite early because the cabin lights are coming on. Tells you that light levels are quite low still. Enough rambling. Let me get in the cabin and then I'll catch up with you shortly. There is something quite satisfying about just starting the fire in the cabin. I've said it a million times, but this is a really nice little stove, and from that little tiny base and flame, in about 3 or 4 minutes there should be a really nice base. And even better, the kettle's just starting to boil, so let's get that coffee on. I'm just giving the fire a chance to get going. Got a little puff of smoke coming out the chimney, so hopefully by the time I finish this quick whiz round the garden, it'll have a decent base and I can get some bigger wood on. But just very quickly, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but just as a kind of a reminder of where we are. We've got the polytunnel, which is 6 metres in length by 3 metres wide. So those beds that are in there are obviously 6 metres long by probably a metre to just maybe 1.5 meters in width. Not quite, but maybe close to that. And then you'll know we've got at the moment got these 3 barrels plus one across there with the Jerusalem artichokes in, which I'm using for potato crops. We've got the 3 little raised beds, which are probably about 9 not quite a metre wide, by about 2 metres long, so roughly 6 by a metre, sorry, 3 by a metre. And then there's 2 little raised beds. All will become clear in the cabin chat later. But that's what I've started off with this year, and you'll know that this is my first real year of producing anything on the land at all. And whilst there have been some successes, equally, as with everything in life, there have been some failures as well. And it's important to pay attention to the failures, because they are not failures, they're lessons learned that will be valuable for the future. So, a little quick whiz round there as to what's there now. And clearly with the cabin itself, I've talked about doing polytunnel version 2 as a kind of attachment to the cabin. So all will become clear as I go through the video later. So let's take a little quick look at this fire, and hopefully we'll get some more wood thrown on. Yep, that's going well. So I've got my little base. We'll get some more wood on. It is nice and satisfying having that little fire going. And once I've finished popping this wood on, that's going to be toasty warm for me while I drink my coffee and have a little cabin chat with you. Well, here we are with a cup of coffee. It is quite cool out there this morning. I've got chilly fingers and a chilly nose. I've left the door open actually, because looking out the door, you would think it was a summer morning. The grass is very, very wet, but the sun is peeking over the trees, and although it's chilly, I've got the wood burner going, and it's actually quite nice and warm in this corner. A couple of things I wanted to just run through on cabin chat this morning. One's kind of connected with yesterday's cabin chat on the subject of bugging out. I had a couple of comments early hours of this morning. Hopefully there will be some more waiting for me later. But really kind of around emphasising that if you are going to leave the normal home and go to a bug out location, having some idea of where that is. And that could be quite a difficult subject for some people if you don't have access to somewhere that's off-grid and sustainable, such as the cabin here down on my little piece of land. But it is worth just doing a bit of out-the-box lateral thinking, whatever you want to call it, and having a look around at what's in your area. Clearly away from the urban population, but there are lots of little places tucked away, old disused buildings, caves even, depending on where you live. And as I said in the cabin chat yesterday, there will be lots of places that are abandoned, that are within striking distance of your home, so it's not beyond the realms that you could get there by vehicle or on foot. So just have a little look around and a little think about where you could go to that's away from the urban population centres, but would provide you a basis to start off to create something. If we did end up in that total grid down scenario, fingers crossed we don't. Might sound odd a proper saying that, but yeah, I don't want the end of the world to come. Not just yet anyway, I've got a bit of living to do first. But yeah, have a little think about that. But the main topic of conversation today was really around the garden here at the cabin. And it's that time of year now where the harvesting is all but complete. We're into October already. I can certainly feel it in the fingers. And you'll have seen the progress this year with my first off-grid garden, and what's worked and what hasn't. And really the subject I wanted to talk about today was getting to that point of self-sufficiency with your garden, wherever that happens to be. I did a little quick video tour this morning as I opened up, just to act as a reminder, because I'm conscious that while I'm doing these cabin chats, you can't actually see what I'm talking about. There's no visual aid. So hopefully that's sufficient for you to know what I have here on the land in terms of growing space. Clearly I have a substantial amount of growing space. There's 1.6 acres here for me to go at, but it's all about being manageable and sustainable. I don't have the equipment right now to be able to manage and tend the whole 1 and a bit acres, nor do I actually need to sustain me. The growing beds that I have been a very useful exercise, both in terms of actually getting me started so I could put some produce in the ground, but also to give me a gauge, an idea of how much growing space I physically need in order to produce sufficient food to sustain me through the year. And clearly what I have now is nowhere near enough. Though with a little bit of thinking and learning from the experiments I've done this year, it's not a vast mile away from where I do need to be. If I take some crops, specific crops as an example, let's look at the potatoes. And this year I planted out 3 barrels of potatoes. I also had a couple of containers at home, but let's disregard those for now and focus on here at the land. So those 3 barrels all yielded crops of potatoes, some better than others. I think one of those barrels was badly impacted by the weather that we had this year. We had quite unusual amounts of sunlight, consecutive days of sunlight. Sunlight's probably the wrong word. High sun, high temperature is probably a better description. So it was a bit of a strange growing year this year, and I've noticed a couple of YouTube channels that I follow who have allotment gardens or homestead gardens, and they were saying similar things, both here and in the UK. So I think one of the barrels was particularly badly affected, and the volume of potatoes produced wasn't as high as I expected. And in one case, I did have some damage on the potatoes. It was a kind of a scab on the potatoes, and although it did clean off, I did peel those potatoes. It clearly wasn't the best that I could have achieved. But in terms of volume, those 3 barrels, each barrel was sufficient to give me potatoes for between 2 to 3 weeks. And again, bear in mind that's just me. Though having said that, it's just me. Potatoes are something that I eat every single day, without fail. Every day as my part of my evening meal, I always have potatoes, carrots, broccoli, cauliflower. So I am eating them every day. So that 2 to 3 week supply from that one barrel is actually quite surprising and quite sufficient for me. So all I need to do really for next year is to calculate out how many additional barrels I need to plant. And with all of the vegetables, I also need to learn from this year and be a little bit smarter in terms of when I actually set the plants, so that I've got that continual succession of harvest through the year. I got it a little bit right with the potatoes, it has to be said. And indeed, you'll know that I've got another barrel already sprouted and heading towards a harvest in probably, I'm guessing, 7 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks from now. And fingers crossed, I did plant some tubers to follow on from those, though in all honesty, I suspect that they're not going to produce. I'll be stunned if they actually put out growth from those tubers, because we are in the wrong time of year now. But hey, it's all about experimentation and seeing what works and what doesn't, and whatever does happen, I'll know then for successive years of planting. So moving on from the potato barrels, we've got the raised beds. Now, as I showed in that little short video clip earlier, I've got a combination. I've got the large raised beds inside the polytunnel, and then I've got 3 medium-sized raised beds. It's my neighbour's geese saying morning to me. Morning. Yeah, 3 medium-sized raised beds, and then a couple of small raised beds scattered around the back of the main raised beds themselves. And this year, you'll know, predominantly I focused on the stuff that I eat, which is absolutely what you should do. So I had plantings of broccoli and cauliflower, and again, you'll know from previous videos, broccoli, hugely disappointing. I produced a lot of it. I did make the mistake, actually it wasn't a mistake because I did it deliberately, but it's a learning lesson for next year. I didn't plant succession plants with the broccoli. I just grew a load of seedlings and threw them into the raised beds and hoped for the best. Yes, I did produce quite a lot of broccoli plants. Pretty much all of what I planted survived through to cropping. However, the type of broccoli that I planted wasn't the type of broccoli that I'm used to eating. I normally eat just plain green, don't know what the variety is, broccoli that you would get in your supermarket, but I planted out a kind of purple broccoli that didn't produce the big heads that I wanted. It just produced single stalks, lots of them, but I also suffered a lot from damage to the crop, both from little critters like rabbits. I'm assuming it was just rabbits, but I also had a big problem with butterflies. Quite how they managed to get in through that netting still remains a bit of a mystery to me, but they did, and you'll have seen that in my videos as I've gone through the year. A lot of leaf damage, lots of caterpillars, so all in all a very disappointing harvest of the broccoli. The main lesson learned from that really for me is, do I actually need to change what it is that I eat? I am used to eating broccoli every day, but if I'm going to have issues with growing broccoli and getting sufficient harvest from it for me to eat it every day, then do I need to have a rethink and not rely on that as a staple? It's just a thought. The other plant that was quite successful was the cauliflower. Again, I did make a bit of a mistake in that, again, like the broccoli, I just produced a load of seedlings, threw them into the raised bed and let them go. So everything was appearing for harvest at the same time. That proved difficult then for me to be able to harvest all of the crop that was growing and ready for picking in time for me to be able to eat that. So there was a bit of wastage there. Some cauliflower did become overripe. I wasn't able to harvest at the correct time to make biggest benefit of it. Hope that makes sense. Didn't sound like it was making sense as I was saying it. Yeah, lots of cauliflower grew, and I wasn't able to pick it, and some of it went bad on the plant. That sounds better, I think. Again, there was damage with little critters, and again, particularly with butterflies. So I need to have a little rethink as to how I protect these green crops as we go through the main growing season for them and into the harvesting period. Other things that I planted were more of an experiment rather than deliberately to get a crop. So things like the garlic, which is still in, that's really around me just figuring out what it needs in terms of space to grow a decent crop and when to plant and when to harvest. I have got that wrong. I did put them in at the wrong time of the year, and I realised that. But again, it's a little bit of an experiment to see how they will progress over winter. And do I get a crop in the new year? Normally, I think you would be planting at the start of the year to harvest around about now. I've kind of done it the wrong way around. Everything's a learning experience. So looking at what I produced this year has given me a good idea of the type of thing I need to be planting, when I need to be planting it, the emphasis on succession planting. So as I start the new year off, I will be producing seedlings in stages through that year in order to plant out and produce the fully grown mature plants in succession. It's also given me an idea of how much I need to plant, with the objective really, again, I don't think I'll be able to do it next year because the best laid plans often do go wrong, but the idea is to get to the correct volume for me to be able to not go to the shop and have the vegetables and fruits in sufficient quantity to last me through the year. I think with any grower, particularly off-grid growers, I'm not sure that it is possible in my climate to have that continuity all the way through the year. The growing season just isn't there. I think that in reality you would need to go back to how it was in the olden days when we didn't have this 24/7, 7-day week, 365 day of the year availability of all this variety of food. Everything was grown according to the season, and whilst you could store some things away to last you through winter, you just couldn't have everything. And I think you have to be a little bit realistic and appreciate from the start that that's where you're going to end up. And if by some miracle or adept use of technology you're able to grow a limited amount right through the winter period when normally nothing would be growing. So say in a polytunnel or a greenhouse, or if you're able to heat that polytunnel or greenhouse, it might be possible to sustain a limited amount of food growth through that winter period. But I think really everybody needs to be a bit realistic and understand from the start that the self-sufficiency garden, everything is not going to be available, and certainly not in volume all the way through the year. So you are going to have some lean periods in wintertime where your variety of food is going to be quite drastically reduced. And the more I think about that, the more I kind of realise that in winter months you are going to be back to the real basics of perhaps potatoes, onions, carrots, turnips, swedes, the more root crop type of vegetable, and things like your cauliflower, your broccoli, your tomatoes, they're just not going to be there. So anyway, I guess that's all an experiment yet to come as I progress with this off-grid experiment, and as I develop the garden area and the polytunnel area. Speaking about which, I've been hunting around the last couple of weeks trying to source materials. I've noticed on a few YouTube channels since the COVID crisis hit, lots of people talking about inavailability of certain building materials. Lumber, wood being one of those. Lots of people in the States saying that the availability of lumber has declined quite substantially and prices have gone up quite dramatically. Lumber, or timber as we call it here in the UK, has always been ridiculously expensive for what it is. But we don't really have wood production here in the UK. Lots of trees, but the biggest majority of our timber, I'd say, I don't know, got to be over 3/4 at a guess. It all comes from overseas, from mainland Europe generally, Norway, Sweden, those Scandinavian countries. And it is expensive. It always has been expensive. But nonetheless, with the thought in mind of changing my polytunnel, I've been looking around for timber, and for this roofing material, this polycarbonate corrugated sheeting that I've got on the cabin roof, with the idea of producing something that's much more robust, and I can stop having sleepless nights then about the polytunnel being destroyed or flying away across the treetops due to the high wind. So yeah, bit of a focus today on garden and polytunnel, but that's why. And I just thought it might be worthwhile having that little cabin chat about producing your own food from your self-sufficiency garden, and some of the lessons that I've learned this year and the thoughts that it's given me for where I want to be next year. Because I have to confess, as I walk around the polytunnel, particularly this last few weeks, as the growth has started to die back and the food production has all but disappeared, my mind is constantly racing about what do I want to do next year, and it's like an itch that needs scratching. I am really keen to get on with planting out again in the spring. So yeah, it's going to be a bit frustrating over the coming couple of months as we head into winter, as I keep looking at the sky thinking, can I get started with some seed production? Anyway, I'm starting to get a bit of a chill through this open door. The wood fire has stopped crackling, so I'm guessing it needs some more wood putting on. And I've talked myself to death, so I think I need to get myself another coffee, and then I'll pop outside and get a few of those odd jobs done, hopefully before this storm front moves in. One thing which I almost forgot, I don't know how, because it was really successful, was the carrots. I got all the way through to the end of the cabin chat and then realised I hadn't mentioned carrots. Shame on me. But the carrots were really successful. Those little 10-inch pots that I grew them in, I have grown them at home that way before, so I knew that it would work. But I was pleasantly surprised by how well they did work. And I've had continuous, pretty much, harvesting of the carrots. One of the big benefits that I've found with carrots is that you can leave them in the pot. Once they reach that certain stage, they appear to kind of go dormant. They'll get to the point where they kind of say, yeah, that's enough growing now, I'll just sit here, which is great because you can just leave them there. And indeed, you'll have seen in my previous videos, I have left them several weeks after they're kind of, what's the word? On the packets for the seeds, it will tell you the growing season, when to plant them and when to harvest them. And if you work off that, mine should have been lifted several weeks earlier than they were. So that's a useful lesson learned, that don't just go by what it says on the packet of seeds. Do your experimentation, your trials, practice growing them, and you might be pleasantly surprised, as I was, that they will actually sit there quite happily for several weeks after the packet tells you that they should be harvested. And I guess the other big benefit with carrots, similar to potatoes, they're much more forgiving in terms of storage. They're a lot easier to store once they're out of the ground, unlike things like broccoli and cauliflower, which once they reach that maturity, you've got to pick them and eat them. Otherwise, as I found with the cauliflowers, they'll just rot and die away and become useless. So yeah, carrots, as I say, I got to the end of the video and then realised I hadn't even mentioned them at all. And since they did me such a big favour this year by producing quite an abundance in those pots, I don't know how I could have forgotten them. The other couple of things I didn't mention, the squash and the pumpkin, disappointing, but I've never grown them. I have no clue. I've watched a few YouTube videos to get a bit of an idea, but to be honest, those videos were produced in climates quite different to mine. So yeah, it is a big learning curve. I guess we'll still see what happens with those because they are still growing away. I already know that there's going to be very minimal fruit produced from those. But again, it will be an experiment in finding out how to cook them. And probably the only real benefit that I will get from this year's crop is the seed. I will deliberately make a point of trying to save the seed and then to plant again that seed next year. So yeah, lots of different things, lessons learned from growing this year, what worked, what didn't. Um, and I must remember to be thankful for the success, particularly of the carrots. Something a little bit random for you. I was looking up, there was a bird on the roof of the cabin, and I wondered what it was doing, and I could see something on the roof, so I've just fished it off with this bamboo, and it's a rather large half a mushroom. So something's obviously been having breakfast on the cabin roof. Having mushrooms. I could do with a nice breakfast of mushrooms with some bacon right now, but I'll not try eating this one. Just having a quick walk around the boundary like I do. That looks quite beautiful actually. The sun peeking through the trees. Like I said earlier though, it is deceptive because it is quite cool. But while I'm here, I'm just looking to see what might be available in terms of fuel source. There are quite a lot of trees in this woodland that are either coming to the end of their life or indeed have fallen in the winds, which this year we've had quite a lot of seriously big wind. You might remember, don't know how long ago it was, a couple of weeks ago maybe, we had some branches, big branches came down. This is the remnants of those. So I'm going to take a little look and see what's useful in there and I can use for firewood. We've got a little horse going by. You can see that on the bridleway that runs at the other side of this wood. Quite nice to see in the morning. Anyway, I digress. There are, yes, lots of fallen trees. Some of them have been here for a while. There's a few there, if you can see those or not. They've been down for a while, but I'll take a little look and see what's worth salvaging, and I'll just put those aside to dry out. This will be fresh because it only came down over recent weeks, and I'll put them aside to just dry out. I have got some wood that I'm going to cut up that's been sheltering under a tarpaulin, but I just thought it's worth taking a look as a sustainable source of fuel in years going forward, because there is plenty of it. Certainly. Well, there we go. It's a start. Well, we're gradually chopping away at that tree limb and getting it into more manageable sized logs for the wood burning stove. As with everything, time is the killer. Everything takes longer than you think, but I'll keep plugging away at it and eventually have a little pile that I can just air dry and be ready for use, maybe in the new year. A little bit more housekeeping while I'm here. This is bags of sawdust to use for the composting toilet. These 2 bags have been stored under the wood pile all year, so I'm going to pop these into the bag that I use inside the cabin just to top up the toilet as and when it's used. Fiddly job, messy job, but it's all got to be done. Just give you a quick look at that. So there we go, a nice fresh sawdust ready for use in the composting toilet. Well, I've covered up the wood pile because, as you can see from the sky, that storm front is moving in. The sunshine was pretty short-lived. I've just topped up the water tanks as well, as it's back to work in the morning, so I want that to keep going through the week and just self-water what we have got left in the polytunnel, which isn't a great deal. This fig tree, I thought it had actually stopped growing, but clearly it hasn't, because we've got fresh growth coming all over it, which is a bit strange. My one single solitary fig, but it is there is one. So yeah, I'm going to get myself closed up, get the polytunnel shut up, and get the cabin locked up, and that'll be about it for the day, I think, which is a shame because I was on a bit of a mission with all these little jobs that never seem to get done, but it's all progress, and that's what counts, as long as we're making progress. Well, that's the cabin locked up, and not before time, because those clouds are moving in quite quickly now. Polytunnel's all closed up and ready, so it's another day done. Get myself back home. It's amazing how quickly the day passes. I know I do keep saying it, but it is. And look at that. As I'm leaving, the sun is trying to bluff me. It keeps peeking out from behind those clouds, but it's on a losing battle, I'm afraid. That rain is going to come pretty quick now, so I'll get myself off. Another day done, and a bit more progress.
Well, that's it for this video. I hope there was something in there that was of interest to you. If you did like the video, please do click on the like button. Also feel free to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. As always, I welcome any comments, questions or suggestions you might have. Just feel free to leave them in the comments section below. But for now, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.